Now we are coming to a different topic strand with the following sessions circling around sustainability and nature preservation. I told you we want to do a DLD biodiversity this year. Ask for more information soon. To kick it off, this session's array with a lot of good energy, allow me to call to the stage my friend Felicitas von Peter, founder of Active Philanthropy. Felicitas changed my life 3 years ago by taking me on a learning journey to Greenland. And I think not only me, you brought many, many friends to Greenland. Come on stage. And it was an incredible experience, and really an incredible experience she organizes every year. Never before I was able to grasp the realities of climate change than at this amazing journey. Felicitas, I owe you so much. Thank you for that. What are you bringing us now?
Thank you, Steffi. Can we have the mic?
Microphone? Mine works.
Okay. Well, it's great, as long as Sandrine's works. I went to Greenland 15 years ago, and I was totally blown away. And it changed into a very special trip when Steffi came on our very first women's-only trip. Because what happened after Greenland, my first experience, is I realized that we all know about the climate crisis, but we don't really know what it means to us. And so we started organizing trips to Greenland with scientists, for decision makers, to raise awareness, not just for the science, but for the impacts and what we can do. And Steffi came on the very first women's-only trip. And I can tell you, if you ever want to have real fun and real impact, go on a trip with only women.
Yes.
Yes.
And we've organized 4 trips, and many people have asked, what's the title of the session? Witches, foxes, Rockies? Well, Steffi, as you all know, is a witch. She's been always a witch, but now she's also a Greenland witch. And so we are bringing you the best of the 4 trips, some of the Greenland witches, foxes, Rockies, and Twilight Zonies, and we'll talk about what the trip meant to us and what we each do. And so I first would like to ask on stage Sandrine Dixson-Declève, whom you will fortunately see a little bit more about. Quick question, who's been to the Arctic? How many penguins live in the Arctic? 100? 2,000? Okay, you've all done geography. None. Greenland is the world's largest island. It's 6 times larger than Germany. And it's got a population of 65,000, which fits into a very small village in Bavaria. So it's a land full of ice. The trouble with Greenland is what happens in Greenland doesn't stay in Greenland, because the Arctic melts 2.5 times faster than the rest of the world, and we will all see the impacts. And we'll talk about the impacts. And Sandrine, take it off. This is not you swimming, but this is one of us swimming. That's what happens when you go to the Arctic with fearless women who take a polar plunge. What happens? What are we seeing in the Arctic, and what does it mean to us?
Yeah, thank you, Felicitas. And we cannot underestimate the impact of the Arctic, but also the impact of going to the Arctic on us, because it is the true reality check. I mean, the ice extent as of February 21st, so last year, averaged about 1.79 million square kilometers. And that is the lowest it's ever been, ever. And when we went to Greenland, we could hear the ice melting. We could physically see it melting. Hence why it's so important to understand its significance. What would happen if we have that continuous decline? I mean, as Felicitas indicated, it's going to impact all of us. the way in which it will impact, obviously, the amount of sea rise is phenomenal. And if you look at the way in which that sea rise then will impact every single city that is coastal across the globe, and we have already seen direct impacts, that as well will be catastrophic. And we are not talking about 2050, okay? We're talking about today. We're also talking about several islands going underwater in the next 10 years, and the way in which they're already feeling that impact. That's the impact of the Arctic melting. That's obviously the impact of man-made emissions on the Arctic. But something else that most of us haven't realized, and this is where there's been another key reality check over the last year, and in fact over the last 5 years, is that, first of all, the 17th of November, does anybody know what happened on the 17th of November? We surpassed 2 degrees for the first time ever, and it lasted for several days globally. Now, over the last 5 years, we have systematically had more than 2 months of 1.5 degrees, which means that on average, we're at about 1.4 already now. And for some of you who've seen the climate negotiations and the Paris Agreement, we had agreed in Paris, and of course, that agreement didn't make a lot of progress in Dubai just recently, that we would limit temperature at 1.5, because we know that after we surpass 1.5, all of our analysis shows that we will start to have direct impacts on people's lives and livelihoods, but we've already seen it already now. So how have we seen it? And I'm going to finish with just a few reality checks again. I had a conversation with President von der Leyen of the European Commission, and what did she tell me, actually, over the autumn? That during the summer, all the calls that she got from heads of state in Europe were about floods, droughts, and fires. All of which meant that they needed assistance, not only human resources to help them, but also financial assistance, and we'll have Anne also talk about what that means from a cost perspective and how we can reverse the trend of capital flows. But in addition to that, we also saw statistics that were so alarming in terms of the impact on women's lives. Women, in particular in the South, statistics have gone up showing a direct correlation with heat impact and the beating and actually flogging of women. Who would have thought of that? This is an indirect impact, but we know that aggressivity and actually real shifts in human behavior occur when you are looking at crisis or when you're feeling temperature increases on your own body. So let's not end with another dire situation, even though we know it's dire. We do have solutions. And we will be talking about some of those incredible solutions by the incredible women, actually, that participated in these trips. So what is the key message that we're trying to convey to you is, number one, this is not a joke. Number two, let us all go back to nature and understand the impact that this is having on our natural environment. Number three, we are all change agents. Every single one of us can make a difference, no matter what sector we're in, no matter what faith we believe in, no matter what we do with our children, our families, and our parents. This is about an intergenerational dialogue. This is about an enhancement of understanding the reality of climate change on our lives so that we can turn it around and become the change agents that we need to be. There are 5 key turnarounds that we've talked about in Earth for All, a Survival Guide for Humanity, which now actually is resonating with governments across the globe. And where the key issue there is that most people did not realize, and I spoke about this a little bit yesterday, is that we must, if we're going to address climate change, address the social tipping points. So we have to look at poverty, inequality, empowerment of women, and that is partly what this trip does, energy, and food. And if we just focus on those 5 key turnarounds, that will cost us 2 to 4% of GDP per year. That is far under the defense budgets of most of the countries across the globe, and far under the billions, 2.8 billion to be exact, of windfall profits that oil and gas companies make daily. I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you very much, Sandrine. And I would now like to ask on stage 5 wonderful women, companions to these trips, come on stage and talk about what the trip did for you and what you did afterwards. And by the way, while they come on stage, there is one picture where you can spot Steffi. She's a little hidden, but if you know her well enough, you can spot her. Great. We have 5 fabulous women, and I want to start with you, Erika. You represent the world of traditional, old-style business because you work for ThyssenKrupp, but you work on green steel. How has the trip changed your view on what industry should be doing, and what do you see that's already being done that gives you hope?
Well, having worked most of my professional life on finding technical solutions to climate change, first of all, I realized that we are far too slow, far too slow. We have all the solutions, but they are not the technical solutions, but they are still not being implemented. So we at ThyssenKrupp Steel, we are one of the few lucky ones who have taken, in a European context, who have taken a final investment decision to do the transition and to start the transition from conventional production to hydrogen-based production. But again, you know, there are lots of constraints because we still have not fully, we don't fully manage the systemic change. And fully understand what systemic change it requires. It's more than just transforming one company, one industry. We need a whole infrastructure, a whole network. It's the energy transition we need. We depend on hydrogen production. And we need to bring all these ducks in a row, and that systemic approach is still not fully to the full extent happening. And I think if you are there and you feel it, you feel the ice cracking. It is devastating, and you come back and you know what you're working for. But I think, you know, translating it back to the reality we face today, also the political situation, I think we need to bring it to people. It has impacts on daily life. You know, green products are more expensive than conventional ones. That's for steel, that's for food, that goes for many products. And there are economic constraints, so we have to address it, and we have to also stand up in this context of protecting climate. As businesses, we have to stand up and unite also and defend democracy, because that's the only way, and it's the basic precondition for us to go further and to accelerate in deploying all the solutions we are having and stopping climate change from worsening.
Thank you very much. You talk about systems, and I think there's one system that is very often underestimated, and that's the system of finance. And you've been working in finance for all your life. Tell us a little bit about some of the most effective levers you see, and also what you brought back from the Arctic.
Thank you, Felicitas. Thank you for having me here. So first of all, I spent my whole career, as you said, in finance, and whether, maybe this makes me biased, but I think if the money doesn't move, it will not be able to have the impact that we need, certainly in the short run. I believe strongly that what we have been talking about here today or over the last couple of days about AI is very important, but the types of innovations that are going on in climate change, just like in AI, will not move quickly enough to solve or slow the problem for these innovations to occur. They are still in nascent stages, and they need to be scaled. And consequently, if you think about the types of systemic changes we need, like fusion, which was a very interesting discussion here this last couple of days, these things are, one person said 5 years, I hope that's possible, but another person said 20 to 30 years. We need to move more quickly than that. So to talk to a little bit of that, I'm talking about public equity markets. not the private investments that have been mostly talked about here this last couple of days, i.e. venture capital. To give you some statistics about this, and you'll know from my accent that I'm talking largely about the US equity markets, but since we're the second largest polluter in the world, that's important. The US equity markets are about $46 trillion as well. The US venture capital markets, which are the largest in the world, are $1 trillion, to give you a sense of scale as well. If we were to imagine people's portfolios to get a sense of leverage, even very, very wealthy people don't have the majority of their assets in venture capital. It can't be put within those markets. So if we could align the majority of public assets, we would get a much greater source of leverage over companies. I also think what we need to see happening, and thank you very much, is we need to see movement in the slowing of pollution from the existing companies we have. And we can engage in a positive way with these people. And what is the greatest source of doing that? That is through proxies and voting your proxies. I don't know about you, but when I receive my proxies, the voting on the various things that are going on with corporations, I usually go, circular bin, trash can. So we need to get people voting them. What is the greatest way to do that? Over 50% of US equities are held by passive investors, meaning people who are not doing actively trying to get and pick the best stocks. They're just trying to get you into the market. So, and there is only 3 large ones of that: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. You may have heard of them as well. Vanguard is piloting a program in which all of their investors could vote their proxies as well. So if any one of you has invested, get in the pilot program. And that way you could vote for climate change. To make one last hopeful comment, not only about that, which is how we can all change through public equity markets. Why am I hopeful? 2/3 of Generation Zs say that they are willing to pay more for sustainable products. That's the change. And 3/4 of them say they care more about sustainability than they do about brand. I'm Gen X. That I find extraordinary.
Super. Thanks very much, Anne. This shows that the power of stories is also something that's underestimated. And we are at Serviceplan, but hosted by DLD, which is home to Border. Tanya, what kind of stories are you telling, and where do you think is the role of the media in amplifying some of the most important solutions we can follow?
Well, I think we as media are a really important link, right? We have to communicate to the public what's going on. And this is a really complex issue we have to communicate. It's not easy. A lot of people look at it and they say, you know, I don't really get it. Why is there an impact? So I don't have to do anything. I can just, you know, push it away. So I believe as media, we have the task to, first of all, really create a sense of urgency, to make people understand that there is an impact in their life, to relate, for instance, the flooding in the Ahrtal to climate change, to make them understand how all those things are related. This is very abstract and very complex, so we have to make this simple and understandable. And also make it relatable to their life. It has an impact on their life. Right? So that is the first thing, a sense of urgency. And I think the second thing is to create hope, to not, you know, get into despair, to understand that there is innovation, there are ideas. Humanity has always been really creative in times of crisis, and to show what kind of solutions are out there. To make people positive that we can change the world, that we can, you know, do something about it.
And can you give a concrete example, like talk about the Constructive World Award? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, when I came back from this trip, I really understood that we have to support our teams, that we have to support especially the younger generation in our company that is really highly engaged doing this. We have a team, Focus Earth, that is only looking at climate change and stories they can bring. And we have a team around the Constructive World Award, which is an award that we give to teams and to journalists that have great projects and that, you know, help us to communicate those projects. And I think that's very important. We have to give them the honor of showing that their work has impact, right? And that is something we're doing now for the second time. And I must say, I personally felt it very inspiring last year to see what kind of projects, even small projects, people, you know, it's not professors or something, but people who just said, I want to change something, I want to do something. And the solutions they came up with were sometimes not that complicated. Those were things that we can do in our everyday life, like, you know, plant hedges around our garden or something. And that I found very inspiring. And we have to invest as media houses in this kind of teams and this kind of news. We have to turn the narrative from a really negative narrative to a positive, optimistic narrative. That's important.
I heard yesterday 10 million people watched videos just on Focus Online, which means lobby border. Tanya is the head of digital, so I'm sure she'd be willing to listen to any of your stories you have about positive change.
Please bring us stories. We would be happy, please.
We always hear changing, transforming is expensive, and nobody will afford it, and it doesn't work. Now, we were very lucky to have Bettina with us, who is with BCG, and as you know, BCG understands something about numbers. Bettina, tell us something about the true cost. Is it really so expensive that we can't tackle it?
Well, I would say turning green into gold, you know, is actually quite hard. That is true. However, I would offer 3 perspectives, you know, that we're also bringing to our clients to unlock them in going on the journey. The first one is, you know, even if you can't be perfect, there's no reason to not do anything. And so if you look at the abatement, you know, levers and start with the ones that you can do, you know, that actually save you costs, surprisingly there are some, and if you use the money that you save there to fund the next couple of abatement levers that get you a little further, and Erika, I guess, would know what I'm, you know, referring to, you typically get to something between 15–20%, you know, of your sort of net zero journey, and while that is not perfect, there's no excuse to not at least do that. The second argument is, I think it's super important to broaden the lens from cost to the overall product price. So if you take something like a car or a smartphone, and that the same is true for a lot of products, making them completely net zero actually only increases the end consumer price by 1 or 2 or 3%. So, you know, to Anne's point on that, a lot of people at least claim they're willing to pay a little more for green products, and not everybody puts their money where their mouth is, so we all know there's a big gap between that. But something between 1 and 2 and 3% doesn't sound that crazy. So broaden the lens from, you know, cost to end product price. And then I would say, thirdly, don't only think about the cost of action, think about the cost of inaction. Because we all know that not acting now means, you know, you need to spend a lot on adaptation, you know, in the time to come. And so don't assume that your business model and your cost structure is going to stay the same, you know, between today and in a couple of years.
Can you give us a concrete example, just to make it concrete? If, for instance, I was going to buy a car, how much would a car be if it was net zero?
Right. So if we take a car and take a middle class car that costs like roughly $30,000, it's about $600.
$600 to turn it carbon neutral.
Right.
Who would
So
not be
that's
willing
not so
to pay
bad.
$600 on driving a carbon neutral car?
Yeah. So
Great.
that's, but, you know, reality kicks in and there's so much that corporates can do, but in order to stay competitive and actually increase the speed and scope and scale of what we're doing, I think policy and regulation is super important too.
I was going to ask you what needs to happen. As it happens, you've got a specialist on policy regulation standing right next to you. Lisa, you've seen on many stages.
I'm sorry, I'm tired of myself too, so I'm a little...
The trouble is, you do really interesting work, so we want to bring you back. How do you work with politicians, and what do you hear from politicians? Because we always, you know, we always need someone to bang for our own inaction, and very often it's politics, right? Like, if politics were doing X, Y, Z, the world would be a better place. What do you say about that?
This is a massively complex issue, but I think if there's one sort of takeaway on politics right now, is that if you work in business, you think about the economy, you think about parenting, behavior, there's carrots and sticks. And with politics, we're really good at the sticks, right? When we don't like something that happens with our politicians, we beat them, we protest them, we're angry at them. And what I'm asking you just to consider is when you see political parties or politicians being brave and courageous, doing the thing that you know that needs to happen, do not be silent. Now, there may be business risks in being too loud in the media. That's up to you to decide that analysis. But at a minimum, write them a note, call them and saying, thank you, we're here, this is a courageous thing to do. I talk to environmental ministers around the world, MPs around the world, governors, mayors, and they'll say to me, we're really ready to make these changes, but we don't have the support from our constituents. We only hear from the people who are against, not the people that are for. In democracies, we have a voice, not just of dissent, but of approval. So if there's one thing you can do, elections matter, you have to vote. But beyond that, that's when the policy making happens. Don't disappear after the elections. Stick with people. When they make mistakes, you can let them know, but then help them the next time. There are good people in politics that want to make a difference. And I'll say, I've had 7 trips. I've been really fortunate. I'm from Seattle originally. I'm a big nature girl. I find life in nature, I love it. And what you all do, and there are other people who went on the Greenland trip, other women here on the Greenland trip. There have been men that go, Rita, and hello, all of you. What it does most for me, we're living in very fast, hard times. This work of climate, politics, finance, this is hard and cynical. And the best way to break it is through joy. And I just want to thank all of you and invite all of you all to live the hard with a lot of joy. I think it's our only way through.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And maybe to finish it off, just to finish it off, my real life is not as a travel agent, although it might sound like it. I run something called Active Philanthropy, and we help funders and philanthropists have impact on the climate crisis with the ultimate risk funding, which is philanthropy. And I just want to raise awareness and share that one of the most effective things you can do with your donations is to fund organizations that support systems change, either through litigation, which is taking companies that do the wrong thing to court, or through convenings. Cities consume, or cities are responsible for 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. There are great organizations working with cities on the cities of the future, involving youth movements. There are wonderful organizations supporting the buildings of the future with wood. So you can do a lot also with your donations and with your societal impact, next to moving pension funds, supporting your politicians, sharing other stories, and doing whatever you can. The biggest loss you can do is do nothing. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, dear all. Since we are here with Cardinal Marx, what is the role of the church, what you just heard?
Nice.
I'm not prepared for this, but I think one message for not only the church, but Christian faith, perhaps other faiths and religions, is that we are one community on this planet. I always say this is one of the central convictions of the Bible, that we are brothers and sisters and we are one family. And I think this is the horizon of your work also. The horizon of your work. Because then you see we have to act, we have to be together, we have to think also for the consequences for the others, to think from the others. I think this is one of the main messages the religions can bring in this great movement.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for the support.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
Vielen Dank.